for my energy. If I want to sit down, I feel like I'll just kind of. I've not been getting enough sleep lately, so I just want to. I want to have the energy to communicate something with you guys. I really think I've got something here. So I want to share it with you. And then my thing is, like, I feel like this is my last opportunity to share something before we either put this thing out, right, and then encourage kind of the wrath of the beast, or kind of fade into obscurity. So within probably 2 to 3 weeks, we'll begin printing. So I want to, basically I've been an open door about it, but people, like the tech people, they're like, well, tell us about the technology. And like the news people are like, well, tell us about, why you're doing it. Oh, you're some kid in school and stuff. No one really wants hardcore ideology, and I can kind of understand that. I'll talk about ideology a little bit. That's what I want to get at, like the why as opposed to the how. We can talk about the how, though. I plan to open this up to questions if there's time. I have not prepped this. I haven't practiced this. I just put these notes together. I never speak from notes, typically. But it's like there's too many quotes. I couldn't organize it, so, here we go. Woo! Yeah.
Ready?
I know, man. All right. So what are the easy points about the project? The ones you probably heard, or if you don't know. I'm Cody Wilson with Defense Distributed. Defense Distributed is just, well, it's nothing, but technically it's now something because we made it a non-profit because we had to. Long story. So it's a distributed internet collective. That was its goal. We wanted to be just like groups you've heard about, Null Crew, Anonymous. These people who just kind of come together, break apart, right? But do something, contribute something, put something out there in the world. Things have changed, but we're playing the game. We're playing ball. So what are the easy points that you might have heard? What are we trying to do? We're trying to print. Please, guys.
Guns. We got more chairs back here.
Yeah, here. We're trying to print guns, and that idea alone for like 2 months got nothing but ridicule from /K, the tech communities online and stuff. And these aren't even communities I'm really part of, but they're like, oh god, this is bullshit. And it's not the point that it can't really be done. It's how can it be done? Is it achievable? Is anything really that outlandish anymore in these kind of conceived futures that we have? And I say no. So why not print a gun? Why? Just to print the gun? No, we imagine the project to be, give the file away to people. And through distributed kind of network protocol, people have access now through the free internet to the firearm itself, anticipating kind of this culmination of productive processes that really establish reliable replication of that gun. Okay, so it's not just a plastic squirt gun that blows up in your hand in 10 years, in 20 years, right? Everyone kind of, if you've heard of the project, perhaps you've heard at least this much, that we're anticipating 3D printing technology as a general use technology, one that supplants CNC milling. CNC milling is just a kind of alternative way of producing capital with specialized capital. You're not going to buy $20,000 instruments and put them in your garage just to print guns, but you might one day have a 3D printer in your house, especially because you can do other things with it, just like desktop publishing, right? You can. I'm telling you guys things but let's establish a foundation. What are the other easy points? The Wiki Weapon Project, it's easy right now because we're attempting to shortcut gun control rhetoric with progressive argument. Okay, it's almost mercurial in that way. There's an NPR interview tomorrow. Okay, I forget the guy's name, but he does this national tech show. Listen, I'm on there tomorrow. I troll this guy the whole time. All right, because he's like, well, but the social cost of guns. I'm like, look, you don't make this social cost argument when it comes to the First Amendment, when it comes to the Fourth Amendment, when it comes to the right to a jury trial. You don't say, oh, but God, we let the guilty go free. Oh, how terrible, We have instead Blackstone's ratio, which is saying better that 10 guilty men go free than 1 innocent man be punished. What does that mean? It means if rights are serious things, if we respect these things and we suffer social cost, that's what it means to be serious about rights. The Supreme Court, and of course the framers of our Constitution, this republic, said the same thing for the right to own a firearm. It's a civil liberty. It's to be respected in the same way that every other single one of those rights in the Bill of Rights are to be respected. And of course we use an internet logic. So we say, well, look, if you're going to get my guns now, you got to get at my internet. And the EFF and the ACLU, of course, they've built a kind of structure already to preserve the internet against things like ACTA, SOPA, PIPA, these kinds of things. So I think we've short-circuited gun control, and they weren't ready for it in this way. So, ecstasy. What's the next one? Wicked weapons as demonstrative spectacle. This one's easy, okay? We knew we'd have trouble from the very beginning. We knew we would probably get kicked off IndieGoGo.com, which is where we started, all right? We thought every problem that we'd have along the way would kind of embolden not only us, but other people and copycats. And it literally happened, not in the exact way we predicted it would happen, but the temperaments were the same. And I couldn't predict that they'd take our printer away like they did, all right? But it was the exact perfect optics, okay? It made, that story went national, well, it went international, when they took our printer away, all right? Wired got it, the New York Times got it, we were everywhere. Like, the collusive members of the political productive class took away this piece of capital because they go, well, you know, you're the vulgar, unwashed. You know, you can't do with this magic device what we say you can't do. It's perfect. We've set up the kind of rhetorical fault lines immediately. So now we're like internet folk heroes, man. You know, we haven't even done anything yet. So it's this spectacle. It's like, how far will they go? Are we really that free? And what are we demonstrating ultimately? It's kind of the implicit threats of this ostensible liberty that we have. Well, sure, I'm free to print a gun, but at what cost? You know, only a fanatic would continue in the way I'm continuing. I mean, I get death threats every week. You know what I mean? I get, it's going to be $2,500 for an ITAR license. It's $180 just for my FFL, another $500 for an SOT. These are just federal licenses, okay? That's not to mention the state comptroller requirements for establishing the corporations, the double corporations that we're doing. We're creating this infrastructure, right? It's easily 30% of our budget, okay? Easily. All right, that's not even the time that I'm spending driving to San Antonio, costs from, you know, and cost of my health, my personal health, right? Nietzsche says, this is why I feel like I don't have my normal energy. I feel like I'm not up to the task. This is why I felt the weakness to print this out, you know. And Nietzsche said, if you live a poor life, you know, you're sick because you live a poor life, not the other way around. And that's the thing. I've been living a poor life because of this project. That's another part of this. That's another part of the political dimension, the aesthetic dimension of it. They make it so difficult to tire you, to stop you. I mean that literally. So those are the easy points, the very simple points. Anyone can get those, they're all over the internet. I don't want to give you guys glib libertarianism. I don't want to say, hey, you know, non-aggression, you know, white markets, black market. You get that every day, okay? So I really want to give you something here, something that I've been thinking about, something I've been trying to piece together. And recently I've been reading, from the very beginning I was reading a lot of Jean Baudrillard, because I fancy myself somewhat of a postmodernist. That's a bunch of bullshit, but it's really fun. But then I was reading some Slavoj Žižek lately, and it's just, he has this inside track, and he's leftist, all right? In fact, he fancies himself a kind of modern-day Stalin. Put that all aside, because he has this rhetoric about emancipatory politics and emancipatory terror that I think I've got to tell you about. All right, I've got to tell you about, because I think there's something of the spirit of terrorism in what we're doing, cultural terrorism, if you will, perhaps political terrorism. So gun printing is a humanism, right? And there's like this ambiguity here. So sometimes I like to call it gun printing as a humanism. I want to show the double valence, okay? Gun printing and the idea of printing guns. Is this a metaphysical theory of the dignity of human beings? No, this is ridiculous. This is patently absurd, okay? I'm not a metaphysician. I don't believe in humanism. I think perhaps in a practical way, if you print guns, if we're all kind of printing guns, or if there was a society that allowed us to print guns, that society would respect, I guess, the autonomy of individual actors deciding to print things on their own. Oh, look at how they're the kind of independent agents of the creation of their own world. All right, that's a practical humanism. But in a very literal, practical way, I think the gun printer, let's say any one of you were to be the gun printer, especially the first gun printer, this person is practicing, this organization, these people are practicing a very intense and narrow anti-humanism. And so the title of the speech is a joke. Gun printing as a humanism? No, it's not. It's an anti-humanism. And I will tell you why. I don't mean to be scary, all right? I think it's the embodiment of a terrifying inhuman attitude, all right? It recognizes something very monstrous and irrational, something not human, anti-human, okay? Where do I find this inhuman attitude, all right? 3 things. Abstraction, rejection of habit, and then an unanswerable symbolic gesture. I'm really not trying to be, this is going to get like verbose, but like I really want to give it to you in a way you can. So abstraction, what do I mean about abstraction? I discovered this, right, from the kind of dialogic process with these reporters, these liberals, our opposition, even our support, an abstraction and a contempt for your own life. The most common question I get from, quote-unquote serious reporters is, are you not afraid that once this is legitimate, someone will print one out and kill you with what you've done, you know? And they say it just like that, moralistically, all right? There's a moralism in that. It's saying, okay, well, it's also like kind of Frankenstein, modern day Prometheus myth, like, oh my God, look at what you've created, it will destroy you. It's kind of like, oh, you can't give this knowledge to you. And of course, I was on the BBC radio, and the guy said, do you not feel like Oppenheimer? And of course, this is absurd, oh, now I become death, the destroyer of worlds. This is so fucking absurd. This is like this hysteria. This is how deeply ingrained the anti-gun hysteria is, right? In these cultures. But still, there's a truth to it, and there's also a threat to it. It's saying, you're going to be punished for what you've done. This knowledge is going to kill you. It's going to punish you. Are you prepared for that? So it's a test. It's a revolutionary test, and I realized it was the first moment of authentic revolutionary communication when I said, they say, are you afraid? And I said, no. And at that point, and every conversation is always the same. The dynamic immediately changes, and they go, oh, you can hear it in their voice and everything. They go, oh my God, he's serious. He's gonna do it. He intends to do it. It's like, it's not a joke. That is what Zizek described in Robespierre as virtue terrorism. Okay? Abstracted, pure principle, pure virtue, used as a kind of ultimate arm, right? Virtue terrorism, it's like hyphenated. Okay, so there's nothing you can do about it. It's almost this Zen attitude that the samurais had in World War II, right? It's like, no, like I'm a dead man, I'm a posthumous man, as Nietzsche said. Like, it's this attitude of like, no, the revolutionary cause is the only impetus. Okay, it will be achieved. My death is simply a historical accident. When people see that you have that kind of, I guess, proto-zealotry, it's terrifying, right? That's the first inhumanity. I hope you like this so far. The second inhumanity is rejection of habit. This one's easy, but it's so, like, you overlook it, right? So what is society, right? What is civil society? If we agree with that concept, what is government? It's this composition of reflexive habits and kind of mores and expectations. Like when we go out to eat, and I go, oh no, I get it, and you go, well, of course not. You're required to reject that, all right? Because if you don't reject it, it's something very vulgar. You've made a huge faux pas. What are we doing by becoming gun printers, especially now, especially the printer's taken away, right? The money's taken away, the licenses, blah, blah. What are we doing? We are defying this polite expectation. It's like, well, you can, but you better not, Well, yeah, we're going to anyway. This is flying in the face of these expectations. This is the kind of second inhumanity. It's not accountable. It's not answerable. And then unanswerable, right? The third inhumanity is this symbolic gesture. I really want to develop this. I'll get to it in my conclusion. So, all right, I need a foil. The Coalition to Stop Gun Violence has labeled me an American insurrectionist. All right, essentially a terrorist. Okay, really a modern terrorist. So, a terrorist is speaking to you today. I mean, it's absurd in one way, but at the same time, it is. I see the logic, and so I want to use. These are weak progressives, by the way. In fact, I mean, their positions are so absurd when it comes to gun control. They believe in totally banning all forms of kind of domestic ownership of weapons. It's an impossibility, especially post-2010, post-Heller, post-McDonald. You have now the protected civil right to ownership of a firearm and incorporated against the states through the 14th Amendment. It's like the fucking Roe v. Wade, of the gun control movement. So it's not going away, but these people still are the kind of zealots that want to take these things away from you. So I think progressives are probably the easiest targets of revolutionary politics, libertarianism. I mean, they're not interested even, in kind of this isn't to, I don't know, slight them. I mean, I really think progressive argumentation is not really built upon premised argumentation. It's built upon maintenance politics and kind of emotional, well, we'll get to it, right? So what do anti-pornographers, homophobes, gun control activists, and in short, prohibitionists all have in common? Okay? I think their fear, their anxiety, their aversion grow from a very intense and repressed desire. Okay? I think the people who are most intensely against gun control are the people who are most intensely afraid of their own nature, right? Most intensely afraid to turn off the light. What would they do if they had a gun? These are people struggling in a very public way, a very internal struggle, right? These are troubled people and they deserve our sympathy. But they want to put themselves out as our political kind of antipodes, like enemies. So we must confront their rhetoric, their politics. Let's do it. I'm going to show you something through the arguments that they make. Progressivism is timid, okay? It's not even as bold as the New Left, right? Your professors, for example. the academics and the literati. These, the new left, Mr. Postmodernist, Mr. Neo-Habermasian, they say, we would like a sanitized revolution. Okay, so long as we keep our jobs, our standard of living, these kinds of things, we would like the revolution. Sure, Marxist, let's be socialist tomorrow, but I'd like to keep my tenure. This is, as Zizek says, the revolution without revolution, right? Sex without sex. It's ridiculous. And I think also built upon a fantasy, a Lacanian fantasy that I want to try to develop. Progressives don't even seek revolution, all right? They're even less than that. Progressivism isn't a revolutionary politics, okay? Libertarianism isn't necessarily either. In fact, if you're a civil libertarian, that isn't a politics. It's just a disposition towards civil liberties. So we're kind of in a rhetorical no man's land when we talk about progressivism vis-a-vis libertarianism. Fine. I'm not wanting you to take anything specifically away from your own position, all right? What I want to talk about is progressivism, though, all right? Here's George Novak, 1956, all right? This is a communist critique of the progressives. And I love it. I love it. I read the Marxists all the time because, like, the progressives are equally good punching bags for the revolutionary communists and the revolutionary anarchists, all right? Even at their most radical, the political ideas of progressivism did not transgress the boundaries, and he's talking about the 30s and the 20s here. They did not transgress the boundaries of bourgeois democracy, which had been built upon competitive capitalism. Their interests, the interests of the progressives, their hopes and their outlooks were bound up in the maintenance of the capitalist system itself, whose prosperity they wanted to share. This is Ayn Rand, right? All right, the smarmy kind of progressive or whatever is happy to be the kind of succubus, right, of the capitalist order. I'm not going to delve any more into objectivism than that, but you can see how, like, the politics of Barack Obama is incipient. It's what's the word when you're a parasite? Yeah, it's parasitic, okay, upon the capitalist order. Therefore, it also requires intrinsically the maintenance of that capitalist order. You must preserve the host, to bleed it ad infinitum. This is progressivism, okay? It's a maintenance apologism. They're essentially conservatives. If you take nothing else away from this, get this. Progressives are conservatives, all right? Remember, progressives are conservatives. They are social and economic conservatives. They believe in a status quo ante. They have an ideal utopia which has already passed and they are trying to return to. They are reactionaries. Anti-revolutionary reactionaries. Remember. All right. Are we doing good so far? Everybody all right? Okay. Am I loud enough? Is that fine? Okay. I'm really getting to gun printing, I swear to God. Purity politics, right? Purify capitalism, purify democracy, purify the environment, purify your body. Don't eat, or don't eat wrong, eat right. Don't smoke, This is progressivism, okay? Here's Horowitz, all right? And Horowitz, I forget his first name, but he's the leader of the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, okay? I don't know if he's really a committed ideologue, but he literally writes what I'm about to read from you, okay? This is from his book. It's like Democracy and the Insurrectionist Idea. He establishes what he calls the insurrectionist idea, which is basically a conflation of classical republicanism in the early American Republican concept of, like, well, liberty must be protected from power, all right? And the Founding Fathers basically had a dialogue about, like, well, we should have access to arms to protect ourselves from this power. Well, this whole strain of Enlightenment thought has now been kind of transubstantiated by Mr. Horowitz as a right-wing reaction in the modern day, propagated by the NRA. I mean, it's totally ahistorical. I mean, it's ridiculous. But let's read what he has to say. Mr. Horowitz says, insurrectionists, that's you and me, anyone that believes that we should have access to arms, publicly, civilly, not even as a justification to, shoot anybody. Insurrectionists confuse their anti-democratic sentiments with legitimate revolution. All right? Legitimate revolution, remember that here. They cast themselves as punitive leaders in a modern-day revolt on behalf of people to restore democracy and freedom. As we describe later in this book, and I wouldn't recommend the book. It will make you mad. Revolution is not sanctioned by the Constitution. It does not enjoy legal protection as an individual right and should be avoided unless there is a complete breakdown of democratic institutions of government. Two things there. Revolution is not protected by the Constitution. It's this regulationist idea, right? I'm reminded of the Chinese who wanted to recently, I think it was this year, regulate the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. It's just the idea that, like, the life sphere itself can be regulated at some absurd point. So, well, this is policy for revolution. Well, okay, step B, revolution. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't write revolution into the legal code. It's absurd. I don't want to talk about that, though. So this is one of the best descriptions of ideology. I want to get at the ideology of progressivism, okay? One of the best descriptions of ideology is from Marx. They do not know it, but they are doing it. Okay? This is ideology. They do not know it, but they are doing it. It's the fantasy that literally structures social reality. It's not an illusion that describes what's really happening. It's the fantasy that actually makes what is real. This is ideology. So how are these progressives, this kind of progressive, the progressive that labeled us American insurrectionists, terrorists, how are they running away from the American revolutionary thought of that early republicanism? How are they running away from itself the central thought of all democracy, which begins with revolution? All right, we studied the material history of the world, right? All democracies have begun with essentially a crime, against some sovereign. How do they run away from that? It's in the text that I gave you. Okay, democracy itself is terror. How they get away from it is by appealing to a big other. All right, this is Jacques Lacan, the big other. What is the big other? It's part of the ethics of psychoanalysis. Okay, perhaps you've heard of psychoanalysis. The big other. All right, and here's how you can see it in Mr. Horowitz's words. Okay, it's a religious fantasy essentially. It's not God. All right, it's secular. And you see where I'm going with this. I've already established, I think, in my words, the progressives as conservative. Number one, this is in the little passage I read from you from Mr. Horowitz. There is a substantialization of democratic general will. What does that mean? Horowitz writes, revolution is illegal. No minority has the right to proceed to it. It can only happen after a complete breakdown, in his words, a complete breakdown of democratic institutions. So you see, you and I, we're encapsulated in the social contract. We are trapped in the social contract. There is no legitimate way to proceed to revolution. We must wait for this inevitable historical breakdown, all right? Well, why can't we vote revolution? Well, it's illegitimate. So here's Rousseau, right? Right from Rousseau. This is from the Social Contract, Book 2. The citizen gives his consent to all laws, including those which are passed in spite of his opposition, and even those which punish him when he dares to break any of them. The constant will of all the members of the state is the general will. Okay? By virtue of the general will, they are citizens and free. When in the popular assembly a law is proposed, what the people are asked to do is not exactly determine whether they approve or reject the proposal. Think Obamacare, think NDAA, right? Congress isn't being asked to approve or reject Obamacare, okay? They're being asked, each man, to state his opinion on the point of whether this proposal falls inside of the general will. Okay, this is Rousseau, you guys, Social Contract. When, therefore, the opinion is that it is contrary to my own, when the opinion that is contrary to my own then prevails, this proves neither more nor less that I was mistaken, or that the project was mistaken, but that the thought of the general will was not so. What he's saying, what Rousseau is saying, and by Horowitz's words, what he's confirming is that the social contract literalism gets around the questions of your rights as a minority to proceed to revolution, to do things outside of, legal encapsulation, by describing democratic process and general will as constitutive rather than performative. Hold on, just stay with me here. Right? By voting, we're not deciding to perform or deciding upon some contingency of our destiny. We are actually discovering what the democratic will is. Okay, do you see what I'm saying? We're actually discovering by voting that there's something that pre-exists the act in question. Okay, I'm going to give this to you. All right, it's a substantialization of the thing itself. What we're trying to determine by voting, by Rousseau and the Social Contract, is the progressives. We're not trying to determine our future. We're trying to determine our destiny, what has already been preordained. All right, this is democratic will as predestination. All right, it's Calvinism. It's religion. All right, it's an appeal to the big other. It's saying your acts are judged from the viewpoint of some kind of eternal, outside of history, final day of judgment. There's some objective truth about what we're passing here, and it is the fate of civilization. You get this in Hegel, you get this in Marx, the end of history, the end of capitalism, okay? It's this predestination concept. I literally believe this. I'm not shitting you guys at all, okay? I mean, perhaps you can see what I'm saying. I'm looking at your faces and just like... Number two, in Horowitz's words, all right, there's a reified idea of social necessity. What is that? He's saying like there literally is a point where we can know when it's socially necessary to have revolution. Like there's literally this point, and there's this great book about the the Weimar Republic. I have not got around to reading it. I recommend it anyway because I read the reviews. So they thought they were free, right? And we all think, God, if I was in World War II, Weimar Republic, I'd know. You know? No, literally, they didn't know. Academics, nobody. Working class, they sat there through the whole goddamn thing, and they didn't pick a single point when they thought, all right, you know, revolution time. It doesn't happen, all right? It's impossible. But don't just take my assertion for it, all right? Let's use Lacanian psychoanalysis here again, okay? What's the ethical problematic? Let's use Lenin, okay? Basically, Horowitz used this idea of a legitimate revolution, of a complete breakdown. Like we would know when there was a complete breakdown of, is there a complete breakdown of democratic institutions right now? I would offer that there is, right? Does that mean we can go out in the streets right now? I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like, there's this moment, it's like, well, you know, when it's time. I hear these social conservatives say all the time, people in my family, it's like, well, when it's time. It's like, no, you don't understand. There will never be that time. So here's Lenin in 1917, and I know I'm using nothing but Marxists, but I mean, these guys are the revolutionaries. So Lenin eviscerates this is in 1917, okay? He's writing about the revolutionary vanguard and how to perpetuate the revolution itself. He's saying that he's criticizing the people who are waiting for a guarantee for their revolution. He's saying that they're looking for social necessity. They don't want to risk the revolution too early. Okay? They don't want to wait for the right moment when the situation is mature with regard to the laws of history. All right? And here, this is Josh Horowitz's, the CSGB's completeness of the breakdown of democratic institutions. This is like, oh, that's the maturity of the event. Now it's legitimate. No, that never happens. And furthermore, there's a moral and ethical problematic. All right? Lenin puts it this way. It's as if, before the revolutionary agent risks the seizure of state power, it, the agent, should get the permission from some figure. Right? This is the big other. Like organizing a referendum, right? Oh, perhaps we should, poll and organize a revolution time, right? Let's find out. Horowitz actually goes on to, in this next paragraph, I didn't include it, but he actually goes on to say, well, the Founding Fathers, they were responsible about the revolution. They had committees to study the revolution and decide, okay, it's time to... What's absurd about that? I'm not questioning that it happened. I'm criticizing the fact that it's, one, obscurantism. It's obscuring it intentionally. It's putting it back. Oh, well, this was 300 years ago, and they studied it. It's obscuring it. And then, two, it's mystifying it. In the same way I'm describing how these progressives are kind of religious. It's mystifying it and putting it in the past. They studied it. It was legitimate. It was time. This is bullcrap. We know that, not to very, very harshly simplify it, but the American Revolution was fought over taxes on soft drinks. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there isn't... They knew they were dead men. All right? I'm not going to stand here and tell you about, okay, let's go, time, but I'm just saying, there is no objective way of arguing it's legitimate, all right? We have history, we have God on our side. No, you have to assume that act. You've got to go, all right? You're not going to find the guarantee. That's mystification. Okay, Lenin and Lacan, then. One should assume the revolutionary act not covered by the big other. That's the only authentic thing. You can't claim the excuse. You can't claim the Nuremberg defense. Well, I was only doing my duty. It was, fate, it's history. No, you must simply overcome this fear of taking power prematurely. You can't search for the guarantee. You have to literally confront the fear, the abyss of the act itself. When you step out, when you make a revolutionary act, you step out. You assume the act in solitude. There's no guarantee. No one's holding your hand. All right? Only such radicalism can allow us to escape the present mode of politics. What is the present mode of politics? I'm very quickly getting to gun right now. Perhaps you've seen me suggest it, and I'm sure you have your own opinions of what the present mode of politics is, right? I think it is the post-political by its own description, biopolitics. Okay? I'll talk about it. It is a politics of fear. Every one of you has seen Campaign 2012. Okay? It's a politics of fear, formulated as a defense. This is general politics now. Formulated as a defense against potential victimization, harassment, and excess. These are the only uses of legislation anymore, and you'll see it. All right? Legislation to prevent you from victimization, harassment, and excess. And this excess in every sense of that word. Okay? Its object is the total technocratic administration of life, nature, the life sphere, the world, the universe. Okay? It foresees a future. Well, you can best see it with this ecological global warming narrative. Okay? There's an eschatology. Well, the end is nigh. The end is coming. Okay? What can you do? Well, you must sacrifice. Because you're free, you must live on one of our approved, 24 housing projects. You must recycle. I mean, it's about, because you're so free, everything is prohibited. Okay? This is the new biopolitics. Here resides the true line of separation between radical emancipatory politics and the predominant status quo politics, which is these biopolitics I just described. It's not the difference between two different positive visions. It isn't, oh, well, what do you and I have in common? What's different between us? Well, let's see. No. Radically different politics, okay?